So anyway, staying on with innovation, that's our keyword for the evening. In fact, our next panel will look at ways to develop inclusive frameworks to drive innovation as automation and artificial intelligence threaten disruption. And to put things in perspective, we have the following members for this panel. Ms. Debaroti Sen, Managing Director, 3M India. Ms. Geeta Manjunath, Co-founder and Chief Executive Officer, Niramai. Ms. Meena Ganesh, Chief Executive Officer and Managing Director, Portia Medical. Ms. Rekha Menon, Chairman and Senior Managing Director, Accenture India. And Ms. Abha Bakaya, Senior Anchor of ET Now, will be moderating this session. Welcome back, Abha. It's over to you.
All right, good evening again. And it really doesn't get more power-packed than this. We have some of the most powerful women in Indian business with us here tonight. And who better to really talk about the way forward and creating more inclusive workplace, culture, India, than, of course, the voices we have with us here tonight. So thank you so much. So, the whole idea was to talk about really what inclusion is all about, how we can really address every single area, not just gender, but also, whether it's caste, whether it's, whether it's minorities of other kinds, but across the board, really, and how this can also help in driving innovation. So let me just initially get all of your first thoughts on this. Debaroti, let me start with you. How you feel we could perhaps address a broader audience and how you feel this would help.
Sure. I'll have to use your mic. Thank you for the question. Been blessed to work in a company that's known for driving innovation through inclusion. 50 years ago, our then chairman and head CEO, McKnight, spoke about the fact that men and women, so imagine 50 years ago saying men and women, who want to innovate, who want to do things their own way, they have to be given the freedom. They have to be allowed to prosper the way they want to, right? So that's the core, the fundamental belief that we have in our company. And a long time ago, even in India, 30 years ago, we've had these conversations where we said, we need to make sure that we are mimicking, mirroring what our customers look like, what our customers speak in, the language they speak in, where they're from. And gender is obviously the most ubiquitous basis that we should have for even claiming any sort of inclusion credential, so to say. If we can't get gender right, how do we stand in front of everybody and say we're getting LGBTQ right? There's just no way you can prove that. So from where we sit, innovation is so dynamic and so necessary for a society. It needs to be reflected in the composition within the company that's trying to get those innovation credentials.
Hi, wonderful to be here and also next to some of the people I admire most. Yeah, I'm Geeta, and to me, when you talk about inclusion in innovation, I want to focus and sort of think about technical innovation and what does diversity mean to technical innovation? How do we actually have more women get into the technical innovation area, demonstrate their innovation capabilities and so on and so forth? Earlier panel was talking about how such a digital platform or a technical platform is so key to make big businesses happen. So, it's a ladder towards making something big, building something big, even as an entrepreneur. So personally for me, I've been a sort of, innovator, scientist throughout my life in some sense. And again, like some of the comments made in the previous panels, I've been mostly a single lady throughout the class, or on the panel, in a room, or everywhere, right? So for example, when I did my master's in Indian Institute of Science, till then I was not even talking to any boy because I was so shy. Even when I was in the bachelor's and so on. But when I was pushed into this IISc where I was the only girl, I had to remove the shyness around and then start reaching out. And so that's how earlier times used to be, right? When you talk about education and so on. But furthermore, when I joined as a research scientist in some of the supercomputers, research center in India and so on, there again, very few ladies were there. And some of the females were mostly brought in to do some kind of software development part, but the actual research roles, really, there were hardly any women, right? So that's what happened. And then again, when you go to a PhD level, again, you find very few women. So I think, for me, when you talk about driving inclusion in innovation, I think we need more people in doing research. It could be STEM or general technical thing as well. So there, again, one of the points that was made in the earlier panel is to be bold enough to talk about your ideas, right? I think we need to encourage our daughters, sisters, granddaughters after some time, I guess, all of them to, when they come up with an idea, sort of make sure we can build on that. So they get confidence that they can speak out their ideas, right? At home, first of all. Next, when as a lady, we go into a room full of men and we are proposing a new idea, it's very hard because we get a lot of pushback. And personally, I can talk about many of the cases where if there is an idea that's proposed, you need to prove the idea. And as women, we go out and double prove the idea. Like, if a simple POC was sufficient to prove that it works, you just go all out and show the whole thing works and people will pay everything. Only then we feel it's successful. So I think this double proving and being able to express the idea without worrying about what others will say and so on and so forth, I think encouraging such a mindset is what I feel is the main need of the day from a driving innovation perspective.
Okay, great to get that perspective. Meena, let me get your thoughts as well.
So when let me talk about entrepreneurship, and entrepreneurship is about showcasing innovation and actually taking the innovation to a logical conclusion. And if you see the amount of, or the number of women entrepreneurs, they are very, very few. And I think that starts from the kind of social conditioning that women go through. I mean, today it's great to have a career, and that's something which is approved of, but to take a risky role of being an entrepreneur is still something which is not the most approved or not the most appropriate path for women. Because, why? Because women have to settle down. So the most unsettling thing that you can do is to be an entrepreneur. So we need to remove, firstly, that mindset from the society and allow women to feel that if they have an idea and if they think they are the best person to build out that idea, it doesn't matter what stage of their life or career or motherhood or whatever, all that is happening, alongside that, why can't they continue to develop that? So that is one thing which both from the society and from the investor and the ecosystem of entrepreneurs need to see this as a very, very viable and legitimate route for women and support that. The second aspect of innovation and inclusion is around startups from small cities. I think we really need to encourage a lot more of men and women, all from the smaller cities, to get access to ideas, ability to grow those ideas, capital, mentoring, whatever it takes so that they can take their ideas to fruition. So I would look at diversity and inclusion in the entrepreneurial space from both these perspectives.
Just share with us, Meena, maybe a challenge and a learning from your experience that you think would perhaps help some others.
You see, I'm a very poor role model because by the time I started to become an entrepreneur, I was already halfway through in my career. I had about 15 years of career behind me. So the kind of questions that young women entrepreneurs are asked was not something that was posed to me. But when I look around, I do see a lot of young women who are wanting to become entrepreneurs are looked at with a little bit of suspicion, with a little bit of worry. Are they serious about this? Will they really take it through to the conclusion? Will they stick around through whatever life changes that they happen and not drop the startup? Now, the same thing can happen with men also, but this extra focus of suspicion, if I may call it, is definitely there when it comes to women entrepreneurs.
Okay, so yes, please.
I was just listening into everybody and saying, if we look at, I mean, I was just looking at it from a business perspective, saying, if we look at the last few years, the number of Fortune 500 companies that have disappeared off the planet is huge, and it's accelerating, right? And you know, we're seeing more and more of that. And the only way to survive is to innovate. And in order to innovate, you're going to have an inclusive workforce. So for me, it's not the right thing to do or the good thing to do. It's just the business thing to do. And that would be the reason to make inclusion part of your strategy.
Okay. Are there deliberate things that institutions are doing, Rekha, to kind of make sure that diversity becomes more of a push rather than a pull?
Yeah, so I mean, I can speak for Accenture. So we took a stand a couple of years ago where we said we'll be 50-50 by 2025, which is a very public statement globally. And then we'll measure it, and we'll be the most inclusive organization on the planet, and we'll measure it. So one, there's a public commitment, it's measured, and it's from the top. The second thing is really then you have to have enabling policies and practices, right, which is part of the institutional building. And the third really is you have to have a culture of equality, right? And the culture doesn't have to, and when I say equality, it's not about gender alone. It is about being inclusive of all castes, races, sexual orientation, abilities, and creating that culture so that people can really innovate and speak their mind and feel comfortable. So those would be.
Okay. Devrati, I've heard you agreeing to a lot of these points. I just want to bring you back in here. And yeah.
So maybe a couple comments from my side. It was very interesting for me. So I came back to India after a 14-year sojourn in the US working at the corporate headquarters. And I still remember I had probably forgotten a little bit how hard it was in India for our young women to grow in the organizations. I was one. I worked in India for 10 years. But it was very interesting for me to actually realize that we've lost over 1,000 basis points of female participation. When you don't have participation, you can't have progress. So when I came back, that was probably my biggest challenge and my biggest necessity. I still remember in my earliest days, one of my operating committee members, as we were talking about potential of one of our senior female leaders, he specifically said, she's really good. She's got a man's head on her shoulders. Quote unquote, I'm not making this up. And I literally paused. And I looked at him and I said, can you just repeat what you said? I don't think he'd realized he'd said anything that wasn't acceptable. And by the time I said that, the other folks had started leaning away from him, that subtle body language saying, hey, we don't agree with him. But the second time he said it, he said, that's not what I meant. And we took a pause, we chuckled, but we said, then please say what you mean. Is anything wrong with my head? Of course, at that time, I was the only woman in my own operating committee, and today we have 4 of us, and it definitely feels different, and we're definitely looked up at and looked upon. It's hard for a young person to come into an organization, look up, whether that young person is a male or a female, look up and see no one like them. Whatever that like them is. Our company started in Bangalore, and we realized in the early days that we had a vast majority of our people who were South Indian. Nothing wrong with that. But if I'm a North Indian, and I'm from Delhi, and I'm trying to join, and I feel 3M's the place for me to grow, I look up and I see no one like me. It's the like me that's really important to build participation. And then you talk about progress. If you don't have participation, progress is far away, right?
Okay. And really interesting points that are coming out of this. Geeta, just to come back to you, and you spoke about your own personal journey, but today when you're looking at an organizational culture, again, what are the things that you see happening?
Sure. Surprisingly, I think one thing that she said is absolutely correct. That is, if the leadership is women, you will have more women, for example, one aspect of what she said. So it happens here as well. Both of the co-founders, are women here in our Niramai, where we have developed a new way of doing breast cancer detection using AI. And it turns out that almost 70% of our team is women today. And in fact, we were trying to sort of hire another leader, so that we have a broader leadership team. And we're thinking, if everything is equal, I think we should get a male, because we want to have a diversity in our leadership team. So I mean, like, we were laughing and saying, like, first time. Yeah, because of course in my previous leadership roles in multinational companies, we were talking about 25% being great and so on. I mean, it was very interesting. Just last week we were saying, maybe if all equal, at least we should have 3 men in the top 5 list that we put in.
Okay. So, are you seeing any roadblocks to this process? When you're trying to institutionalize it, when you're trying to create that opportunity, when you're trying to give the platform to the next generation of innovators.
Well, let me talk about what I think enablers, what the kind of enablers that are required. I think first and foremost, the need for role models, and role models at different levels. It's not enough to have very, very visible and extremely successful high-level role models. You need role models at every level. You need to see a 25-year-old who started a company and who's raised some money, who's failed, gone back, tried something again. You need that role model. You need a role model of a person who's built a company, who's grown it, who's sold it, who's moved on to do something else. You need different kinds of role models, because then you say, okay, from this step, I think I can get to that step. It's not enough to just have a star to aspire for. So creating a whole set of role models and exposing other women to those role models is a very important thing. The second thing is to have adequate mentoring for women entrepreneurs, because one of the things I have noticed, a lot of women entrepreneurs are a little unsure about their ability to do a number of things. For instance, they believe, because of whatever conditioning has happened, that they're not good at selling, they're not good at raising money or managing investors. For this, they need to get a suitable male to work with them, because men can be more aggressive, they can raise money better, they can manage investors better, they can sell better. So you need to help them remove some of those, uncondition them and say, oh, that's not true, you are as good in your role, in your company, you're the one who's got the highest degree of passion, you're the best salesperson. So you need to help them overcome some of these conditioning so that they're able to take their companies forward.
Rekha, how do you link diversity to business value? You spoke earlier about, measuring the percentages, making sure there was some accountability and that was able to be tracked. How do businesses today negotiate that fine balance?
So from a business perspective, again, you can do both input and output measures. So the input measures, if you were doing diversity, would obviously be, are you meeting the numbers, whether it's hiring or is it retention or is it promotion? I mean, we do promotion pipeline reviews to see, are we leaving adequate women out, right? So we look at promotion and say, are you promoting enough women? And if they're not, why aren't you? Right? So those are all the input measures. But then the output measures would also be, I would say, 2 or 3 of them. One, are you meeting the pyramid numbers? That's a very easy measure. But second would also be, is there business value being added? I mean, we've seen over and over, there's enough studies shown that if there are women at the top and on the board, then those organizations perform better in the same industry, financially better than other organizations which do not have a diverse board or leadership. So that's one more measure that you could look at, which is financial. But the other measure would be innovation. And how are you doing on the innovation quotient?
So we've spoken so much about innovation today that I really just want to get some more thoughts on specifically what you would define as good innovation. The reason I'm asking is because I also get a complaint from a lot of entrepreneurs. I met an entrepreneur earlier today who said, I'm looking for venture money, but they're not giving me money because I'm actually doing something new. So, yeah, it's kind of ironic. He said they're looking for a lot of proven models and they're not willing to take that bet. In the corporate scenario, what would you look for? What's the kind of energy you want to see? And how do you feel having a more inclusive environment, brings out that flavor. If you can share some examples with us.
So maybe since we're going this way, I'll start again. So in our company, we believe we are in the business of delivering value to our customers, and we're known for innovation. But that happens through lots of very structured processes. So among the most important process that we have in our company is what we call a 15% rule, which means none of us can, down our organization, tell anybody not to follow a path of passion. Each one of us as employees, no matter what level we are in, can spend 15% of our notional time. Typically, it's 15 of 150%. But 15% of our time pursuing a passion that we have, taking it to a certain level, and thereafter, of course, you have discussions, very much like an internal VC panel, you could think of it that way, where we are pitching our ideas, and then those would go forth for the next round of investment and such. In our world, it doesn't matter. I was just about to tell Meena that, yes, I understand all those biases that people have. Some of our best key account managers are women. And they're very subtle, they're very strong, and they're just incredibly successful. So we haven't seen much of a difference in the ability to pitch, because there is no difference, and I feel very strongly, in women or men's ability to have passion. We are all equally passionate. Of course, we are sitting in India, which is an extremely passionate country. But whether I'm talking about passion in the US or I'm talking about passion in Brazil or in China, men and women are equally passionate. So if you first enable that passion platform, it's very easy to sell from there. It's very easy to ask for money from there. It's very easy to unlock the potential of the company. So we try to make sure that we're fueling the passion, and then let us have organizational processes that allow the best to rise to the surface.
Lovely.
We actually, if I could add to it from a corporate perspective, actually do two things. Just to add, one, we actually started measuring ourselves on how much business in the new were we getting. And if each of us are measured on how much business are you getting in the new, then you are going to drive innovation. You're going to, absolutely, that's the way to survive, right? And that's going to then percolate down. And we actually started reporting it externally, and we call that. And right now, we said new, for us was digital at that time, and we defined what digital meant. And we are right now, we just did our second quarter earnings, and we're doing about 60% of our business in the new. The second thing we started doing was bubbling up a lot more ideas, innovation ideas from our people. And the earlier panel had talked about listen to millennials and the younger ones, and the best ideas are coming from there. And then encouraging that without the hierarchy to go experiment and fail fast.
I mean, that sheds a lot of light into how things are changing right now, and so rapidly and so significantly.
Yeah, just to add, there are a couple of things that we do. We are a small startup, just 25 people by the way, 30 now, right? So still, we do have two teams. One is more, at least 2 years down the line, focusing on what is the product that we need to release. And then another team which is just looking at now. And then, of course, there's a midterm, right? So having this differentiation of where are you going with this technology is one thing that we are trying to do. Of course, in some cases, people, spend time in both teams and so on and so forth, depending upon their aptitude. There's also another thing that we do is to set goals on the number of patents that we want to do every year, every quarter, and so on. Not to just go behind the patents, but to ensure that the new ideas that we are coming up with are captured and documented and proven that it is globally unique. For example, for a young startup as 2 years plus, we already own 9 US granted patents and 1 Canadian patent, right? So I don't think, yeah, thank you. So, I mean, innovation is the core of Niramai, and we want to continue to do that. And so that's what we do. And every discussion is almost like a brainstorming session, every new thing that we want to do. So we start with, as she was mentioning, start with ideas that everyone has, put it down, and nobody should shoot ideas, right? Only building is allowed, right? It's a sort of very structured way of brainstorming that we do, so that we only make better, right? It's constructive feedback, fine, but you only have to build. You should never say that idea won't work. So that's the policy. We go ahead, and of course, towards the end, we prune. But when you are in that mode, I mean, it's so wonderful to see everyone being so creative. It has to be a big room, by the way, yeah.
It's great to hear that. Great to hear that, Meena.
There are two things that I'd like to share. One is in one of the companies which I also run on an executive basis, which is Portia. The way we drive innovation is by constantly listening to the customer, because this is a whole new industry that we've created, and we don't know what is right. We don't know what we need to deliver. We are constantly going back, talking to our customers and patients and understanding what is not working, and then give those problems back to the teams. We have a bunch of very smart ladies, by the way, lots and lots of smart women who take these projects. I mean, the men are also smart, but I'm just saying, we have lots of women. And like Dr. Geeta was saying, at times some of my team members have said, we've got too many women. Can we get some more men? So we have a similar problem going on in our company. And so coming back to the innovation piece, the customer problems are what constantly drive us to go back and see what is working and what is not. Second, because we are still a startup, and we're constantly trying to see how we can grow faster, how we can become profitable faster. Those economic pressures constantly make us go back and look at, this is not good enough. How do we change it? How can we improve the pace of growth? How can we move? This will go, bring in news. There's this constant churn and dynamism that is there just because of the fact that we are still in the early days of startup. So that's one path that I want to talk about. The other is, as a family, we have a platform which we call Growth Story, under which we've, there are a lot of companies, a lot of ideas, and then a lot of companies that have come up over the years. And at this point, we have 14 different companies. Many of them are big names which people will recognize, but there are also a lot of small ones which are all about innovation. There are these, there are three of us. We would someday sit and say, looks like there's something happening in this space. Let's put a small team of people. Let's go investigate. Let's put a little money behind. Create an MVP. Take it to market. Works, doesn't work. Scrap it. Let's move on to that idea. So we have this constant lab of ideas which are churning continuously, and something comes out of that, hopefully.
Talking about the need for role models, don't we have a fabulous set of role models right here today? So, ladies, you've all reached milestones. You've set up amazing businesses. Are leading amazing businesses. What has held you in good stead? If you could just share something from your journey that you could leave us with here today. I mean, I can still see the passion in all of you. But from your journey, if there's any highlights, milestones, anything that you'd like to share with us.
That's a very broad question, but maybe just one that I strongly believe in. So I do believe that success is not owned. I sincerely believe that it's rented and the rent falls due every morning. So keeping myself young in my head, keeping myself hungry, not taking myself too seriously. I'm kind of naturally a very serious person, but believe me, the thing that I'm most proud of is how much humor I have learned over the years as life knocks you and you fall down and you pick yourself up, to actually have fun and not take yourself too seriously, but work harder than you did the prior day. So that's my very simple motto. I share it with my folks in the company, youngsters often. So that's all.
Yeah, so one is, of course, passion, right? Women, I think, love really, really passionately. I guess even men do. But men do too, right? Yeah, maybe men do to their wives, right? So we actually love everything. Essentially, I think the passion, right? Whatever work you choose, and choose something that you really love to do, and then really go all out to make that successful. I think that passion to drive and make whatever you are trying to do successful is one main thing. Personally, for me, there are two mantras, I guess, if I have to summarize. One is learn something new every day, and whatever happens is for good. So whenever you're in the turf, right, okay, there's some reason, somebody out there or somebody is trying to sort of make something better for you. And so it helps you to sort of get up and then run again. And the second is like, what have I learned today? So just sort of going through that, I think it's been wonderful.
Thank you.
Couple of things for me. One is the need to be able to look at the big picture, but then switch to the minutiae without losing either of those. That is something which, especially as an entrepreneur, in early stages of the company, you need to be able to do that all the time. It's not enough to have the big idea, because it's all about execution. It's only about execution at the end of the day. So if you are not able to balance the two, it becomes very challenging. The second thing for me is about humility, is about never ever thinking that you have all the answers, or you know it all, or you're big, or whatever. I mean, all of those are hallmarks of failure. I mean, the moment you get there, then you're done for.
Very important.
So I would say one would be strong self-belief. And I have to thank my parents for that. Because through the ups and downs, the ability to believe in yourself and the ability to change, because we're going to have to change through life. Life will happen, and it did happen. So one had to keep learning and changing. Second, recognizing that we didn't get here by ourselves, that there were a lot of people who helped us along the way, and therefore, how do we give back? And third is leaving a legacy larger than yourself. And I think that's what keeps me going.
Ladies, thank you so much. It's been a learning for me also tonight and a fabulous opportunity to hear all of you speak. Wishing you all the best. A big round of applause. Thank you. Thank you.